everyone! Welcome to Recent Pleasantview Round 3, episode 26. We are finally in Sim State University, and I don't know if you've spotted that or not, but now we have 4 households on campus instead of 3. Here in Land Grab House dorms, I have Townies Plus household with Warren Sims in it. Warren Sims, in case you don't remember, is a Blue Water Village teenage townie that looks exactly like Benjamin Lawn, and he's also one of Alexander Goth's school friends. He's also Joan Baena's boyfriend. I'd love to read his household description. 1 year, 1 girl sounds like a good formula, but Warren still hoped his artistry would work better in his conquests. And with his high school girlfriend moving into the same dormitory, will he get a chance to stick to the old formula even? So this household description hints on Joan potentially joining him at this dormitory in just 1 year. Also, Chandler Platts is exactly the same age as John, so I will move him into this dormitory too, as well as Chandler's almost girlfriend Lucy Burb. That's why it's called Townies Plus. Lucy is the plus here. But for now, the sim that we actually need to move in somewhere is Alexander Goth. We haven't seen him for almost 2 rounds, and I would love to move him into Sim State dormitory, temporarily of course, because the whole idea of Alexander Goth living in a dormitory is absolutely laughable. He comes from the richest family in the neighborhood, and he inherited the Goth manor as well as nearly 200,000 simoleons from his father. I want him to live in this house. This house is originally from Sim State University. This house and this one here are usually normally situated in this area of Sim State University, but I plan a big renovation here, so one day I'll have something else, some other lots in this area. Anyway, Alexander, as you can see, for now cannot afford rent in this house, so that's number 1 reason for me to move him in somewhere temporarily, just to cheat his money. But the main reason, of course, is that I would love to see his cutscene. Of course, I know that Alexander can bring his mother Bella with him, which would be absolutely unfortunate, because technically Bella is missing and everything. I don't want to see her, but I don't play with the clean template here, so that's possible. On the other hand, I do have a mod that lets any relative to be part of my students' cutscenes. So I really hope to see Cassandra in Alexander's cutscene. Cassandra is his older sister and his only living relative. So let's move Alexander in and see if he gets accompanied by anyone or not. Of course, tender-hearted and family-oriented Cassandra simply couldn't let her younger brother go to college all by himself. As much as she was proud that he was all grown up now, she couldn't help getting upset about having to part ways with her only blood relative alive for several years. But she still needed to return to Pleasantview to raise Garrett and Georgia. She still got worried that Alex might befriend someone even worse than Dina, though. After Alexander withdrew 11,000 simoleons from his bank account, he moved into this spacious old-fashioned house opposite Chestnut Park. It's got 2 living areas, 2 bathrooms, and 1 large bedroom. It might be a bit underfurnished, but let's not forget that Alexander wants to have even more money than his father did, so he didn't mind spending less money as a young adult, especially on a house that wasn't even his own. But I still bought a computer for him, because not only he needed to declare his major, but as a studious boy he might also start rolling once about writing his term papers. And here is my issue with Alexander. He rolled a 1 to declare biology major, which indeed was making perfect sense for him, as he was really interested in environment and weather. But don't you think that Alex is already too much like his father Mortimer? Not only they have identical personalities, but also the exact same nature one true hobby, very similar interests, and if Alexander studies the same subject as Mortimer, he will most likely end up in science, natural science, or medicine career. This will basically turn him into yet another crazy rich guy in a white lab coat who lives in a gloomy old-fashioned mansion. But you already know me, guys. You know that I hate playing the same sim with different faces. Additionally, I simply can't believe that Alex, who is over half a century younger than Mortimer and who barely managed to become friends with his cold and distant father, would end up being so similar to his dad. That's why I went with Alexander's pretty high interests in politics, travel and sci-fi instead, making him declare the psychology major so that he could join the intelligence career in the future. After all, his mother Bella had allegedly been abducted by aliens and he's lived in a haunted mansion for all his life, so I bet he should be into solving different kinds of mysteries. After Alex returned from his very first class with wants about buying a bunch of crap, I changed his lifetime want to becoming head of SCIA, and then sent him to university way shops to change his outfit. And that's where Alexander got his very first chance to solve a big mystery. He spotted a girl wearing a unique uniform, which he recognized as the secret society uniform. He'd read about that mysterious association in one of his teenage magazines, so he got really excited about the opportunity of learning more about it and potentially joining the elite. He also wondered if they knew more about alien abductions, so he decided to befriend that member of the secret society. The girl seemed to be equally interested in Alexander, most likely because he'd mentioned his last name. And even when Alexander attempted to say that he wasn't related to that rich and famous scientist Mortimer Goth, the girl didn't believe him as she'd seen their family picture in a magazine. Alexander bought a white shirt with longer sleeves and a black knitted vest. I didn't mind his original outfit, but it was a bit too summery. As Alex was paying for clothes with his gold card, he got noticed by Catherine Gregory, Melody Tinker's crush. A quick reminder that Catherine is bisexual and she's got fortune aspiration, so the reason behind her sudden interest in Alexander is literally lying on the table. And apparently she'd also read that magazine the previous girl had read. She immediately asked Alex about his father, and although Alexander didn't try to lie about it that time, he changed the topic to the most trivial one straight away. Catherine, you see, is quite a pretty girl, so of course Alexander chose to set his borders as soon as possible. And then he turned away to the clothing rack again. After Alexander picked his athletic outfit, he got replaced at the clothing rack by Catherine herself. She clearly felt an urgent need to dress up to impress the Goth heir. When Alexander finished shopping, he went to play billiards. I absolutely don't want him to have the same one true hobby as his father, so my plan is to change his interests via gameplay. I believe that a rich and playful guy like him, who'd always played chess at home, should really enjoy upper-class types of games: chess, cards, and billiards. Besides, he already had the highest possible interest in entertainment. However, he had to go home soon, as he was hungry and lacked 3 skill points to maximize his class performance meter. Cooking, mechanical, and cleaning. It was super realistic that a spoiled boy from a crazy rich family didn't have any of those skill points. Why would he bother about cooking or cleaning or fixing broken objects when the goth had all hired help for all of those tasks? And apparently Alexander was so used to the fact that everything had always been done for him that he even rolled a wand to influence someone to write his term paper. As Alexander wasn't interested in fashion whatsoever, I bought him a small dresser to keep his clothes in. I also made him prepare lunch for himself, and he got half of the necessary cooking skill point. While Alexander was taking a bath, a matchmaker showed up on his lot, clearly to scare this poor boy who's afraid of witches. Then it was time for Alexander to change his appearance. I gave him Mortimer's thicker eyebrows, some stubble because he was already 18 and a bit more on the sloppy side, and I also changed his glasses. He was really happy to look more manly. Because I still couldn't imagine Alexander cleaning his house, I ordered him to hire a maid. He got Lindsay, Angela Pleasant's friend, who'd used to be one of the local cheerleaders, and apparently felt so nostalgic about her college life that she kept on cleaning houses in that area. Alexander felt hungry again. No, it had nothing to do with Lindsay arriving at his place, and he got a cooking skill point while making his second lunch meat sandwich. As Alex was being cheered on by a new cheerleader, his childhood friend Tessa Ramirez called to remind him of her existence. But the first thing Alex called was of course his sister Cassandra. He told her that his studies seemed a bit boring so far, so he felt like solving some mysteries on campus. After that, Alex called his nephew and niece and even became best friends with the latter while dissing their private school teachers. Finally, it was Tessa's turn. She began the conversation by asking Alexander if he'd already found a girlfriend on campus. Although that question did make Alex feel a little uncomfortable, he still appreciated the fact that Tessa thought he could find a girlfriend that easily. Tessa and Alex became best friends. After talking to Tessa, Alexander realized that the cheerleader might have some gold-digging plans about him, so he said goodbye to her. The telephone rang again, and Alex had to face the fact that most girls had physical interest in him. It was Catherine Gregory who called to ask Alexander downtown. As he still didn't feel like falling in love with pretty faces with empty pockets, he lied Catherine about being super busy with his studies and hung up on her. By the way, where did she get his telephone number from? I bet she asked that secret society member to share that information. Anyway, Alexander proceeded to study mechanical indeed, and after he got the skill point, I made him go to the campus coffee house to meet more secret society members. Lucy Hanby's daughter Vin was passing by his house. Vin, you see, is a new Trivar sorority member. She is a girl who was forced to go to college by her mother, but barely has any interest in studying and hopes to get good grades by flirting with her professors. Two more girls from the secret society came to the coffee house, and as much as I wanted Alexander to greet the uglier, nerdier-looking one, he had to greet the one that was pretty, as the former had got glued to the magazine rack and then walked away pretty quickly. The chat with the blue-haired beauty wasn't long either. She seemed like a sim who's too absorbed into their own thoughts. Back at his place, Alex went straight to bed. I think 2 skill points and 2 acquaintances from the secret society is a good enough result for the first half of his freshman year. As soon as he knows 3 secret society members, I'll make him throw a party to befriend all 3 at once. But in the morning I just made him take a bath to provide his maid Lindsay with some more work to do. So as you can understand, Alexander's household is now going to be the first household that we play here. The next are Lilith and Melody. Lilith had her wings cut yet again when she'd lost her loving grandma, and the guy she'd been considering a perfect example to follow got expelled from college. Will Melody's company save Lilith from depression? And will Melody choose her crush or her old principles? Melody all of a sudden rolled a wand to reach Charisma level 1. She clearly wanted to be more like her new friends Kyoshi and Lilith. Anyway, I made her start the day by cleaning a toilet, as she needed a cleaning skill point. As for Lilith, she needed charisma and creativity, and knowing her, she would definitely prefer the latter. She also had wants about talking to a relative and resurrecting Coral. Poor thing. I don't think any relative could replace her grandma to her, even Angela, whom she already had an okay relationship with. And clearly not Mary Sue, whom she was gossiping about with a freshman dormie. Additionally, Lilith really missed Kyoshi, that's why she was trying to play red hands with Sims she barely knew. So after Melody gained a cleaning skill point, I made Lilith play with her instead, and they finally became friends for real. And after that, Lilith rolled a bunch of wants about Dirk, including some romantic ones. I think the reason was obvious. Because Kyoshi had got expelled from university, she couldn't have her casual woohoo with him, but her ex Dirk, on the other hand, was still on campus. So I bet all those wants were purely physical. I'm sure Lilith would never ever want to be with him after he'd cheated on her with her twin. And still I made her call him on the phone at least. Turns out I was absolutely right about her feelings. She still was quite bitter and immediately reassured Dirk she was calling him not to restore the relationship, but just to tell him that he was a jerk and a loser who would never make a good lawyer. Dirk apparently got quite offended by that, and it made Lilith realize he wasn't as cool and sexy as she'd thought of him. Right after that chat, I sent Lilith to the campus lounge to get the necessary creativity skill point. By the way, she had a wand for it. Looks like Dirk was still motivating her, but that time it was Mary Sue's kind of motivation. She was mad at Dirk and wanted to prove to him she would get her diploma regardless of what he thought of her. And Melody got a charisma skill point she wanted so badly. While Lilith was playing the guitar in the campus lounge, I even thought for a second she'd roll the wand to write her term paper, but it was just a wand to play computer games. She's not old enough yet to get as motivated by rage as her mother. Lilith is already really good at playing the guitar, let's not deny it. But regardless of her skills, she was still hated by most of Sim State students and never got tipped. At the same time, I don't think she cared about all that. After Coral's passing and Kyoshi's unwilling departure, Lilith felt lonely on campus and hated the local students just as much as they hated her. Her only want was to get her diploma as soon as possible and return to Pleasantview to cry on her grandma's grave. Anyway, she got her 5th creativity skill point and went back to the dormitory. You see what I'm talking about? The local students also can't wait till Lilith's graduation. At the dormitory, Lilith had to cook for herself because the cafeteria worker had fallen sick and had refused to come to work. By the way, isn't it weird that Lilith has a maxed out interest in food, but 0 cooking skill points? I think now I understand why Angela was mad at her at the start of the game. The telephone rang and Melody answered. Turned out it was a random dormie calling Lilith. But she was too busy having lunch to answer. Meanwhile, Melody decided to continue working on her charisma skill. She was so determined that she completely ignored a brutal fight behind her back. As for Lilith, she was trying to argue with a fellow dormie about who was a better musician. But luckily for him, Lilith's class was coming and she had to leave the lot. In the meantime, I decided that Melody needed to get the necessary logic skill point and that it would be nice if she asked Catherine to join her at that chess table behind University Way shops. As usual, Melody got too nervous before the date and went out to rake leaves by the dormitory. The first thing Melody did upon meeting Catherine was to congratulate her on finishing her sophomore year. But Catherine wasn't nearly as interested in studies, so she changed the topic to kisses. Here is what I've noticed about Catherine. She always rolls more physical ones about Melody and gets annoyed whenever their dates aren't physical enough. Looks like she is with Melody only because she wants to get some woohoo experience with a girl to boast about it to her future boyfriends later. Anyway, the girls couldn't play chess because it started raining and Catherine's seat was taken by the dormie who was afraid of Lilith. Even after Melody had shooed him away, she still had to walk inside herself because she didn't want to get wet. Here is what I'm talking about. Catherine wants kisses, Melody only wants to play or dance at best. Even now, our Miss Nerd ended the date to go to her class instead of satisfying her crush, which became her love after the goodbye kiss. While walking to her class, Melody rolled a wand to buy new clothes, and I was surprised to find out she indeed was partially interested in fashion. She still had 1 year and a half on campus, so I made her buy a warmer outfit right after she'd returned from her class. She bought a yellowish miniskirt with brown boots and a top that resembled Catherine's. I also changed her glasses to the ones with a green frame that matched the t-shirt underneath her new brown zip jacket. Melody was quite pleased with her new look. Back at the dormitory, Melody made a TV dinner for herself, which was making sense as she wasn't interested in health. Lilith's friend Gavin called while she was away. "Oh, Gavin, I'm so sorry, I've already forgotten you were friends." Looking at Melody's interests, I decided to set her one true hobby as nature. It could be arts and crafts, of course, but let's not forget she wasn't as interested in culture as a teenager. Most likely, her recent interest in it came from socializing with Lilith and Kyoshi. At the same time, she's always been quite interested in environment, travel, and weather. Nature one true hobby aligns better with her mathematics major, and it seems more suitable for Mortimer Goth admirer. Lilith returned from her class in a horrible mood. She was hungry, stinky, and tired at the same time. And she also wanted to dance with someone. Yeah, life on campus had been much funnier with Kyoshi around. Later, Melody attempted to go to her class too, but I stopped her as I didn't want her to do too well in comparison to her school years. That would be unrealistic. I discovered that Melody still believed her mother Wanda was her friend, so I made her call home to check on her family. Looks like Wanda started the conversation by asking Melody if she'd got rid of her rainbow mohawk, and Melody replied she would never refuse to be her true self and that she had no plans to return to church anyway. At the same time, she seemed excited to find out that her parents' business had finally started to bring some money. She, of course, didn't want to work in their toy shop herself, but she was genuinely happy for her parents. Unfortunately, Lilith hadn't managed to get all her needs up before she had to run to her final exam. She was absolutely exhausted. Meanwhile, Melody was clearly dreaming of her mother's delicious cooking and accidentally burned her spaghetti in the process. By the way, unlike Lilith, Melody at least had one cooking skill point. After eating her not-so-delicious concoction for dinner, Melody went outside to stargaze. And I found myself wondering why it hadn't been snowing at Pinot Plaza dormitory at all, when Dirk's house, which is technically situated right behind the dormitory, is almost fully covered with snow. Yes, sometimes I miss the Sims 3 open world feature, or just wish the weather would make a bit more sense in The Sims 2. But back to Melody. As I've already said, I don't want her to do too well at college. Although her school grades were unfairly low mostly because of her conflicts with her teachers, I don't want the difference between her school grades and her college GPA to be too big. Additionally, she's not super interested in school. Of course, she's content with the major she picked for herself, but I don't think she loves all the subjects she's studying. And that night she got too tired and didn't get the necessary skill point again. But I'm not going to control her studies too much from now on anyway. Lilith finally returned from her final exam with a C+. Her final GPA was 2.6, the lowest GPA of all the graduates we've seen so far. But to be honest, I think it was a decent result for Lilith, who had absolutely zero interest in school and only went to college in hopes of making new friends and forgetting about her horrible life at her parents' house. She, of course, had always been really passionate about music, but that passion alone simply couldn't bring her more than just 2.6. But the night was still full of surprises. Lilith's crush Kyoshi somehow found out about her graduation and came to congratulate her on that with quite an expensive present. That paintball machine costed over 1,700 simoleons. I knew Kyoshi's father was rich. But although I personally thought very highly of Kyoshi's generosity, I don't think Lilith herself shared my opinion. Of course, she found him cute and talented and was grateful for that great advice to pick a subject she would be interested in, but at the same time she was quite disappointed in him, as he had only been good at giving off the pills he hadn't been taking himself. You know Lilith, she'd always hated the way Angela was sucking up to Mary Sue, so doing just the same to his father clearly didn't play in Kyoshi's favor either. Fine, I finally graduated. Life is going to be better now. But Angela's life will most likely still be better than mine. Now I think I'll go to Dirk's house, and the Trivar house and Townie's Plus household will have to wait, because they're just Townies, Lucy isn't there yet, so let's finish this sub-rotation with Dirk. If Dirk regrets anything in his life, that's probably engaging in romantic relationships too early in his life. After he'd broken the Pleasant twins' hearts, he made a promise to himself to ignore girls completely till he really became mature enough to pick the right one and rich enough to provide for her. To my biggest surprise, shy and serious Dirk spawned with a want to throw a party. Clearly living with Angela left an imprint on him. And speaking of her, as you can see, she took her computer, her TV set and her favorite armchair when she left Dirk's place. No wonder, Dirk really ruined her graduation party score back then. I found out that Dirk's relationship panel wasn't glitchy like his father's. Darren was perfectly present there and even seemed to have quite a strong relationship with his son. I have no idea what happened with Darren here. Maybe he got too absorbed by his new life with Florence that he even forgot he'd been married with a son before her. Anyway, I made Dirk study cleaning to expand his class performance meter and to drain his fun a little before he could invite his father over. And speaking of Dirk's class performance, it was 3.6, and as much as one part of me wanted him to graduate with honors, the other part was saying that he shouldn't be smarter than Angela or Melody. Well, only time will show. After Dirk got the cleaning skill point, I made him change into his everyday so that he could meet his father Darren. By the way, as you can see, logic skill is the most important one for psychology major. That's another reason to why I picked it for Alexander. I can't believe Dirk and Darren will finally meet each other after all those years of silence. Can you imagine, Dirk? Your father has remarried, sold your old house in Pleasantview, moved to Blue Water Village, and you now have a half-sister. Of course, right after starting talking to Darren, Dirk realized his father had been hiding too much from him, so they stopped being best friends because of it. But don't blame just Darren, guys. We all know that Dirk himself had been absorbed into his personal life way too much. I believe Darren hadn't wanted to distract Dirk from his college life with numerous news, especially knowing how studying well had always been important for his son. and Dirk in his turn had been completely sure that his father had still been living his boring life of a single self-employed artist. Both turned out to be wrong. We all make mistakes. Anyway, after an inside joke and a snowball fight, the dreamers managed to repair their relationship. Now the only thing left is to make Dirk meet Florence and Ursinia once he's back in Pleasantview. After Dirk had his lunch, playful Darren asked him to have another snowball fight, but unfortunately for them, most of the snow outside had melted. Fortunately, it also melted in their hearts. You may be wondering, why do I keep Dirk in this t-shirt when it's so cold outside? It's the same reason as in Lilith's case. They both will leave campus by the end of this episode, so why waste their money? Dirk also told his father about what happened between him and the Pleasant twins, and although it was quite a shock for Darren to discover that his son hadn't been much of a gentleman recently, he was still pleased to know Dirk was no longer with Lilith, whom he had never liked. Speaking of girls, as soon as Darren left, Dirk got visited by his best friend Meadow Thayer, who wanted to check on him after his most unfortunate breakup with Angela. Wake up, Meadow! It was Dirk's idea to break up with her. Too bad Dirk had to go to his class soon, and Meadow had to be left alone to do her assignment in Dirk's bedroom. After Dirk returned from his class, I noticed he felt absolutely fine without a TV or a computer at home. It's always way easier to play serious Sims. Angela would have already been in red at this hour. Without Angela around, Dirk had to clean everything by himself. It was the payback time. After that, Dirk went outside to stargaze, and it turned out he already had half of the necessary skill point. It also was quite disappointing that being a fortune sim, Dirk had never discovered any unknown stars which could bring him some money. Perhaps there weren't any unknown stars anymore. Everything had already been discovered by Allegra and Jane. Anyway, Dirk managed to get the necessary logic skill point a few hours before his final exam, but sadly enough his class performance meter wasn't nearly as full as I hoped it would be. Uh-oh. Now I will play the two remaining households off camera, but before I play the Trivar house, I will read the sisters' updated bio. As much as Rosemary is focused on getting an impressive final GPA and on growing her sorority, she can't help thinking about her friend's ex. I mean Dirk Dreamer. I think she has the highest chemistry with him. She doesn't have better chemistry with anyone on campus. With Win, a new and quite flirty addition to the bunch, Will Meadow cast her romantic mood aside and won't Catherine get too persuasive with her shy crush? So I've just finished playing the Trivar sorority and Townies Plus household, and now we are ready to get back to Alexander. Here is his household description. Wherever he goes, Alexander is recognized as Mortimer Goth heir. And while he feels like solving some mysteries and proving himself smarter than his famous father, the others, especially girls, only see him as a walking bag of cash. Will Alex get a chance to make any real friends at college? While Alexander was taking a bath, I decided to read his personal bio, which by the way was quite similar to his household description. Alexander loves being a goth. He is rich, smart and influential. The only things he dislikes about it is that he is compared to his father way too often, and it's impossible to tell if other Sims are being sincere with him. It will be difficult for Alex to find true friends or a wife indeed, as most Sims are straight up broke next to him, and they might be playing nice in hopes of getting something from him, like his family's connection, a nice house to live in while at college, or expensive gifts. But for now, Alexander still didn't know that many Sims, and my plan was to change that. After Alex had his cereal, he went to class. He was so chill and relaxed. I bet he knew his professors would never start their lessons without him being present. While Alexander was away, his maid Lindsay came to clean the house, and we found out his bills were quite high. This is what happens when you live in a fancy house all by yourself. By the way, Alexander was renting this place for nearly the same amount of money that Martin Rubin had spent on his shack in the woods. Yeah, being rich is still kinda cool. Except for the part where you get stalked by gold diggers. Catherine Gregory kept on calling Alexander, and that time she even offered to become his cook in exchange for some help with her assignments. Wow, looks like she is really into Alex these days. And it's not surprising at all, considering what has happened between her and Melody. More on that later. Anyway, shocked Alexander hung up on Catherine again and pulled out a book on cleaning instead. He of course had expected the gold diggers to be everywhere around him, but he still wasn't ready to find out that some of them might be even older than him. As soon as he got the cleaning skill point, I made him go outside to look for more secret society members. And he met this guy from the secret society literally on the very first community lot he visited. Good thing it was a guy that time. I was already getting the impression that only girls would come Alexander's way. Alex, by the way, really needed to have fun, but I made him talk to the secret society member first. And luckily enough, the guy turned out to be just as nerdy as Alex. Later, Alexander went inside to play billiards again, and this mean-looking girl from Pinot Plaza dormitory took notice of his expensive sneakers straight away. I mean, I don't think most girls will find Alex physically attractive. Some might, of course, but he clearly isn't Castanova, Jimmy Phoenix, or Dirk Dreamer. But soon Alexander found himself surrounded by girls anyway. You don't need to look like Don Lothario when your father is a well-known millionaire. Dodging the girls' flirty glances and smiles like bullets, Alexander had to leave that lot sooner than he wanted. He only had a few hours before his final exam, and his class performance was still leaving much to be desired. So as soon as Alexander got home, I made him do his assignment. I was sure Alexander wanted to surpass his father, not only because they had never been super close, but mostly because of Mortimer's condescending attitude to his son, which had always been really annoying to Alex. He wanted to prove to everyone that he was more than a guy who'd been lucky to be born in a rich family. See what I'm talking about? Looks like nearly every girl on campus wants to become Alexander's girlfriend now. And some are even crazy enough to come to his house and stare at him through the windows. After Alexander had done his assignment, he got too hungry and I had to make him cook again. Oh no, he'll have too little time to read textbooks. One lunch meat sandwich and Alexander was ready for a not-so-long studying session. It turned out to be on the shorter side, mainly because of Alexander's playfulness. Reading textbooks was draining his fun too much, so at some point he just put the book away autonomously. Knowing that Alex would have 100% refused to play chess in such a mood, I made him watch TV instead. Luckily, that was also raising his comfort. Eventually, he had to be a little late for his final exam. His class performance meter was clearly on the fuller side, but was it enough to make Dean's list? Turned out it wasn't. Alexander only managed to scrape an A-. To be honest, I don't think that grade was fair. Most likely his professor simply expected more from him and decided to motivate him that way. Now Alex felt like he'd failed himself and rolled a one to make Dean's list next time. And right after that humiliation, he had to cook for himself again. I also noticed that Alex somehow only had 35 hours until final exam, when he should have had 48 hours. Perhaps the university higher-ups expected him to finish this 4-year program in just 3 years. Anyway, I thought that was too unfair and gave Alex 8 more hours for studying through cheats. Come on, it's not Alexander's fault that everyone sees him as some kind of a prodigy. Custer, Jimmy and Martin were smart too, and yet no one had ever judged them as severely. It was already way past midnight, Alexander was dirty and exhausted, but that failure at his exam made him study again. That time he needed one more skill point of cleaning and 2 charisma skill points. Meanwhile, I was thinking about ways to make his life a little easier, and I opted for buying a shower tub combo and changing his bed to a better one. Hopefully Alex will be in a better shape from now on. By the way, he still had that want to influence someone to write his term paper. Maybe he wanted to ask his sister Cassandra for help. I don't think he could trust anyone else with his GPA. It was 3 a.m. when Alexander finally went to bed. Next episode I want him to not only get an A+ on his exam, but also to throw a party for the secret society members he'd already met. Now to Pinot Plaza dormitory. The girls' household description didn't change. Although Lilith had already graduated, I chose to keep her on campus for one more sim day because technically she should have got her diploma a bit later. Now let's get to Melody and what had happened between her and her crush Catherine Gregory. As you can see, they weren't best friends anymore. The story goes as follows. While I was playing the Trivar sorority off camera, Catherine invited Melody over and attempted to woohoo with her, but Melody rejected those moves. Apparently, although Melody is a proud lesbian, she's still being influenced by her religious upbringing, and doing woohoo out of wedlock is absolutely unacceptable for her. And Melody still kept her crush on Catherine, by the way. Most likely she was expecting the sorority girl to apologize and try to make their relationship at least a bit more official first. But I don't think Melody's expectations will ever come true. Catherine, you see, got quite mad after the rejection, and the fact that she now had higher chemistry with rich Alexander Goth would most likely stand between the girls too. Well, at least Melody herself didn't seem to be too upset about the situation. All her wants were about studying. Unfortunately, there won't be a graduation party for Lilith. You see, her friends Gavin and Kyoshi were away, and the only friend she had at college at the time was Melody, who already lived in the same dormitory as her. Still very much pleased with her graduation, Lilith began to dance in the hallway, and it turned out she had chemistry with one of the fellow dormies again. Wow, looks like she's clearly into black guys. And that guy didn't mind to dance with her either. As a freshman, he most likely wasn't aware of her reputation. While Melody was working quietly on her assignment in her bedroom, the bills arrived, and we found out that Catherine was mad at Melody indeed. She'd even knocked over the trash can by the dormitory. Seeing Melody had turned out to be a total waste of time for her. After Melody took care of the mess and Lilith paid the bills, the former congratulated the latter on her graduation, and the girls went together to the campus gym. That time I mostly sent them there for Melody's sake. As you might remember, she was fit but didn't have any body skill points whatsoever, which was weird. And the girls were having a friendly outing, by the way. Lots of familiar faces showed up at the gym. Alexander Goth, whom Meadow had met once in the teenage hangout, Meadow Thayer the matchmaker, and Catherine Gregory herself, who had clearly been following Alexander, using Meadow to allay his suspicions. But she still chose to hide herself in the bathroom as soon as she spotted Melody. Meanwhile, Melody got her very first body skill point and decided to greet Alexander to express her condolences for Mortimer's passing. After that, Melody talked to Alex about some of his father's latest work. And Lilith, who wasn't exactly in the mood for exercising, chose to watch TV. But looks like the TV show wasn't interesting enough, that's why she started an argument with Meadow soon. Lilith must have realized who had encouraged Dirk to break up with her. Anyway, Lilith and Melody's outing ended with quite a low score. No wonder, Melody had clearly spent too much time talking to Alex. And speaking of him, he was forced to sit with Catherine for lunch, because the other table had been taken by Meadow and one of the dormies. Lilith, by the way, was still trying to start a fight with Meadow, so it was a big surprise for me when she suddenly changed her mind and chose to tell Meadow a joke instead. The joke was about a foolish cook who mixed a good egg with a rotten one and lost her job. Apparently, Angela still represented a rotten egg in Lilith's eyes. But for Alexander, it was Lilith herself who represented a rotten egg. He dissed her behind her back multiple times, clearly remembering stories about Mary Sue's horrible daughter. And then he got on a treadmill all of a sudden. Looks like Lilith was scaring him. After the gym, the girls went to University Way shops, where they played chess together as Melody still needed a skill point of logic. Melody told Lilith about what had happened between her and Catherine, and Lilith recommended her not to be an insufferable prude who never even drinks beer. Soon Melody went to her class, and Lilith decided to buy herself a graduation present, an MP3 player that costed around 200 simoleons. That's a must for a young music and dance sim. Look at this! One of the female dormies attempted to flirt with Catherine, but the latter just snapped at her and told her she would never ever start a relationship with a girl again. Wow, Melody got lucky that Catherine hadn't attacked her at the gym. Back at the dormitory, Melody and Lilith were discussing Melody's romantic life again. But you don't even go to church anymore. Why bother about all that religious nonsense? You like a girl, she likes you back. What was your problem? I don't know. I just couldn't do it. Oh shit, that's so stupid. I sent Melody to bed to improve her mood before her final exam. And I thought it would be nice if she called her brother and especially her father, whom she had quite a weak relationship score with. Meanwhile, Lilith was calling Denise Jacquet, her beloved grandma's best friend. As soon as Denise picked up the phone, Lilith began to boast about the amount of money she was going to earn as a musician. Looks like Denise was impressed. Then Lilith called her friend Gavin, but he was still at work and she had to stay at the dormitory for a bit longer to call him in the evening. Melody woke up and went to her final exam, and Lilith received another call from that unknown male dormie who'd called her a few months ago. Looks like he was begging her to let him join her music band, but Lilith replied that she wouldn't take such a boring-looking nerd in, even if she actually had a band. That was rude. Then Lilith packed her belongings and called Gavin again before her departure. She told him she'd managed to graduate after she'd changed her major to literature, but looks like Gavin was a bit disapproving of that. What? I was never interested in that stupid economics of yours. How are your siblings doing, by the way? And then it was time for Lilith to go back to Pleasantview. To be honest, I would love to move her to downtown, but the local apartment buildings are not ready yet. Well, maybe eventually she will end up there. Lilith aged up into a super cute outfit. Too bad it didn't suit her style at all. Anyway, I'll give her a total makeover once she's in Pleasantview. Melody got a B+ on her final exam that time. She rolled once to graduate and graduate with honors. You already know that I didn't want her to realize the latter, but her chances were still quite high, as she only needed one logic skill point that time. After she answered the phone to Ricky Cormier, who was looking for Dirk, she called her father Steven. He asked her if she was calling him to ask for money, and Melody said proudly she was doing just fine with her big school grants, and that she called him to say she had just finished her junior year. By the way, Melody had more hours before her final exam than Alexander. Another reason to believe he was being treated unfairly. Later, Melody called her younger brother Vernon, who told her about numerous cute girls from his school class. I think you've already guessed where I'm going with Vernon. After that, Melody called Alexander, and he wasn't happy about the call at all, telling her he would never accept whatever she wanted to offer. Melody felt insulted by that and told Alex she'd thought he was smarter and could figure out she was a lesbian. Speaking of that, one of the dormies began to talk about her crush on Catherine right behind Melody's back, so I guess Melody will now believe Lilith's predictions about Catherine moving on to someone less boring. Meanwhile, it turned out there was another queer girl at the dormitory who was really excited to hear that Melody was a lesbian and immediately asked her if she was single. Melody was single, of course, but I don't think a serious girl like her would move on from her previous crush so quickly. Besides, Melody was still super focused on her studies. She went out to stargaze that night again. So regardless of Melody having a too-bold chemistry with that dormie, I decided not to make Melody pursue her. I think I have a better idea considering Melody's potential partner. By the way, is it just me or there is something going on between these two dormies already? There's clearly something going on. They spent the entire night talking to each other. As for Melody, she woke up at around 7 a.m. and started her day by making her bed and doing her assignment, as she usually does. And now, the only household we have left is Dirk's household. Dirk only had 2 hours left before his final exam, and his class performance wasn't in its best shape, as you remember, so I woke him up a bit earlier and made him do his assignment straight away. As soon as he finished it, he went to his final exam. That looked like some kind of a big grade to me. Well, he did everything he could. I thought that unlike Lilith, Dirk would throw a graduation party, because he was a guy who wanted to have all the necessary experiences in his life, and he did have a few sims he could invite, such as Meadow, Rosemary, and a few dormies. Sadly enough, now he had to celebrate just a B+ and the final GPA of 3.5. He still did a little better than Angela, though. After getting rid of the old newspapers on his lot, Dirk called Rosemary to make sure she would visit his party. Hopefully Rosemary won't make a big deal out of it. And yet she asked him about his current relationship with Angela, but as Dirk still felt guilty and uncomfortable talking about his previous relationships, he changed the topic to his graduation and overly difficult final exam. But when Rosemary tried to show sympathy for him, he pretended that he didn't care much about his results and couldn't wait to go back home and start making money, which of course he wasn't lying about. And after that chat, I made Dirk focus on earning 5,000 simoleons. Dirk was hungry and wanted to finish off all the leftovers from his fridge, but a couch walked into his house and yelled at him to make him work out. As Dirk was a guy who respected the older generation and was interested in health, I thought he should do what he'd been told to do. And I'd already forgotten that he had a couple of body skill points from the time he'd been employed in the law enforcement career. That tiny working out session didn't grant him the third one, however. Shame. Dirk might not have the pleasant twins around now to congratulate him on his graduation, but at least the llama mascot was ready to be happy for him. And then it was time to clean the house for the party. Life isn't as easy without Angela's helping hands, is it, Dirk? Meadow Thayer showed up on Dirk's lot uninvited again. In case you are wondering, they only have 1 bolt of chemistry, as Dirk dislikes blondes. So probably Meadow came to warn him against dating Rosemary. Something like, "You've already caused enough drama in Angela's life, making her become the other woman in her sister's relationship. Please don't make her suffer again, don't date any of her friends." Anyway, Dirk didn't invite Meadow in, as he was expecting to see her at his party. Then Dirk got visited by a new cheerleader on campus. I barely recognized her without her uniform on. Apparently she was studying the same subject as Dirk, that's why she told him a joke about lawyers. Fine, it would be nice to have her at that party too. The list of Dirk's guests included Meadow, Rosemary, and a couple of dormy guys. But looks like Meadow managed to talk Rosemary into ignoring Dirk's party for Angela's sake. It's good to know that at least some of the sorority girls truly behave like sisters. And to make the party even worse, Dirk burned the spaghetti he was making for his guests. You should have practiced more while living with Angela, Dirk. Luckily, the guests didn't really care about the spaghetti. Only one guy took a plate of it, and the others were just drinking beer. Apparently, the beer stimulated their brain activity. That's why the cheerleader and one of the dormies began to do their assignments, while Meadow was reading textbooks upstairs. Well, this is what parties thrown by nerds look like. And Dirk himself kept on cleaning everything right in the middle of his party. Let's pretend he cared about the guests' environment score. Sadly enough, Meadow had left before the party ended. She needed to feed her pet fishes. And somehow the party score managed to be good time. Dirk took his graduation photo with the cheerleader and aged up into a fancy suit. Very suitable for a future lawyer. So, Lilith and Dirk have graduated. Lilith's final GPA was 2.6 and Dirk's 3.5. Had he been Angela, he wouldn't have disappointed Mary Sue, but it's just the way it turned out to be. In the next episode, I'll move some more townies into this neighborhood, Chandler and John. For now, I will just continue playing the Trevor house and Townies Plus household. I hope Meadow and Rosemary will graduate just as successfully as Dirk and Lilith, although I do have some doubts about Meadow. You see, she lacks a lot of skill points for her graduation, but I really hope she'll make it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're not too upset for Melody, whose relationship with Catherine suffered. Well, one bolt of chemistry, I don't think that's sufficient. Also, Catherine happens to be quite a sporty girl and Melody isn't. Anyway, I'll see you all next time here in Sim State University with some more townies, Melody and Alexander. Bye!